Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining our Clinical Development Awards webinar. Today we're going to be going over our newly released CLIN2 program. Couple of quick announcements. First thing, submissions are due June 30th. And this webinar is going to be recorded, and a subsequent post-webinar FAQ document will be crafted and posted on the CIRM website within 1 to 2 weeks of today. Just so everyone knows, the QA today is going to focus on questions that were pre-submitted by the registrants. You are still welcome to enter any programmatic questions into the Q&A chat or send an email to us at clinical@cirm.ca.gov, and we will either address your questions directly in that email, or we will compile your questions into the FAQ mentioned previously. So I'll start off by introducing our CIRM clinical development team. Today, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Lisa Kadike, our CIRM fellow, as well as Dr. Paul Webb, our senior science officer and program manager. Dr. Sohail Talib, our senior CIRM fellow, as well as Dr. Joseph Gold, our senior director, and myself, Kyrie Warren, the project manager. Additionally, you'll be hearing from other members of our team, including Dr. Elizabeth Noblin, our CIRM fellow for the program development and portfolio management, Dr. Rosa Canet Aviles, our CIRM's chief science officer, as well as Dr. Janie Byram, our senior science officer for R&D data infrastructure. We'll also be hearing from our senior officer from grants management, Alexandra Caraballo, and Dr. Lila Collins, our associate director for portfolio development and review. This webinar is going to be split up into 2 parts. The first 40 minutes is going to be a presentation going over the program overview, as well as the application process, and giving you information and resources for our applicants. And then we were reserving 20 minutes to go over the pre-submitted questions that were given to us when you registered. And with that, I'll hand it off to Dr. Rosa to go over our program overview.
Thank you, Katie. Hopefully, can you hear me well? Great. Next slide. So I just wanted to, I'm going to give an introduction of 4 or 5 slides. And what I want to do is take the opportunity now that we have the audience of potential applicants interested in clinical development to provide a high level, very high level of what's coming down our pipeline in the coming months. And for those who might not be familiar with where all the renewed and new programs are coming from. And our programs, as always, are within the context of our proposition 14 and our mission, which is to accelerate world-class science to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and the world. Next slide, please. So many of you know that in the past year and a half, our team at CIRM has been hard at work with first the development and second the implementation of what we call the strategic allocation framework, which has been a structured and data-driven approach to prioritize resource allocation that ultimately led to recommendations to the Independent Citizen Oversight Committee, our board, for continued implementation of CIRM's strategic plan. And that was back in September when the recommendations were approved. And we have been moving towards the implementation of those recommendations in the form of programs. The CLIN2 and itself is an amendment to the previous program. Next slide. So the recommendations that we made to the board were in the context of the following. Next slide. I don't know. Maybe I'm delayed. There's a delay or something. There you go. We're in the context of the following 6 impact goals that were framed in 4 categories, and that will guide our actions and funding priorities for the foreseeable future. These goals are designed to accelerate the discovery and translation of therapies, advance critical approvals of cell and gene therapies, improve accessibility and affordability, which is very important and is reflected on Goal 5, and ensure as well that a diverse and skilled workforce capable of sustaining advancements in regenerative medicine happen. So goals, someone is advancing before I get there, but it's all good. There was actually another slide that I added last minute, so it's okay. I'll speak to that slide, but if you can just go to the previous slide, Katie, before. So the goals 3, 4, and 5 are within the remit of the clinical development team and this program. This program mostly speaks to the 4th goal, but it also has the components of Goal 5. And what I was going to say in a slide that I added in very close to the beginning of this meeting, so my apologies, is that we are implementing the SAF in 3 phases, and this program is part of the first phase. So for those who might not be familiar, back in March, CIRM presented to the board 5 actually concepts. And the first phase that we have completed the approval and we've already launched 4 of the 5 programs are very critical for us. They are the research and development programs, and they are the DIS4 program, the preclinical development program that we have also a webinar for those that are more interested or that have an interest on lead optimization up to IND filing. That's the program for you. And then the clinical development, CLIN2 programs, which is what we are going to focus on today. Next slide. So this slide outlines, is there a delay or is it me? And there you go. It outlines the CLIN2 program, which is being adapted to directly support Goal 4, which aims to propel 15 to 20 therapies into later stage trials for diseases affecting Californians. As we shift into execution mode for the SAF, the CLIN2 becomes an engine that will help us deliver on this goal. To do that, we've implemented some changes, and some of that are the program preferences and funding criteria that better align with our mission and intended impact. The first of our guiding principles is that we will prioritize funding therapies that not only show potential for transformative clinical impact, but also have a clear and credible path for access and affordability. And for those who were not familiar with it, we had an accessibility and affordability working group AAWG meeting on March 30th, I think it was. I think it was March or April 30th, that we presented a new toolkit that has been implemented into the new CLIN2 program as well. And that is to help and educate everybody following the accessibility and affordability principles. And the second is that we will build a diverse portfolio of therapeutic approaches across disease areas and modalities that reflect the complexity and the breadth of unmet needs in California. And these priorities will be informed by both internal portfolio analysis as well as external landscape assessments, so we understand where we are making progress and where there are critical gaps. This is actually going to be presented in June, at this June 26th ICOC board. And we are going to be setting preferences in a regular way every January with portfolio assessments that will be presented to the board with recommendations. So together, this approach ensures that not only CLIN2, but the other programs are not just a funding mechanism, but a strategic driver, an adaptable driver of our long-term mission to deliver impactful, accessible therapies to the people in California and eventually to the world. And with that, I'm just going to lead on to my colleague, Dr. Lisa Kadike. Lisa.
Great, thank you, Rosa. So I'm going to give a few slides here to cover the high-level scope, structure, eligibility requirements, and activities that are allowed and not allowed in the new CLIN2 program. So to start out with, this program will support completion of an interventional stage 1, 2, or 3 clinical trial, and that would include pivotal trials for a stem cell-based or genetic therapeutic candidate. It may also support an associated natural history comparator study or a lead-in normal healthy volunteer study. And CLIN2 projects should aim to progress a therapeutic candidate towards a later stage trial and eventually towards BLA or NDA filing. And another critical component is to create a well-developed plan for ensuring access and affordability if the therapy is eventually approved by the FDA. And I also want to stress that it is very important to CIRM, and we are seeking projects that have potential to address significant unmet needs and have transformative benefits to patients, families, and the healthcare system. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just want to go over the high-level award structure here. This program, as I mentioned, will fund all stages of clinical trials and for a maximum planned duration of 4 years. This program, in contrast to all our other programs, is open to both California and non-California organizations. Please note, though, that the allowable costs for non-California organizations are different than those for California organizations. For non-California organizations, CIRM will only fund the per subject share of costs that are directly attributable to the treatment of subjects in California and the costs of manufacturing that is done in California. And there is a broader definition of allowable costs for California-based organizations. So it is very important to consult our program announcement and associated documents for details about allowable costs, and also to learn the CIRM definition of what is a California organization. The maximum award amounts for the CLIN2 program are variable depending on the phase of the clinical trial that is proposed and on the for-profit versus nonprofit status of the applicant organization. As you can see in this table, first-in-human trials will be eligible for $8 million of funding for a for-profit applicant or $12 million for a nonprofit. Later stages will be eligible for up to $15 million per award. There are co-funding requirements for the CLIN2 awards that also vary depending on the clinical trial stage and the for-profit versus nonprofit status of the applicant organization, as shown here in this table. So for for-profit organizations, and I should also say for the for-profit partners of nonprofit organizations, there is a 30% co-funding requirement at the first-in-human stage and 50% for all later stages. In contrast, for nonprofit organizations, there's no co-funding requirement unless the trial is a phase 3 trial or any stage pivotal trial. Next slide, please. And okay, there it is. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the program is open to both California and non-California organizations. And this is to fund stem cell-based therapies or genetic therapies. And please do reference our common requirements and definitions document that's linked in the program announcement for definitions of those terms. As for readiness to apply, all projects that are new to CIRM must have attained FDA clearance of the IND and the associated clinical protocol before submitting a CLIN2 application. The rule is, however, slightly different for projects that are progressing directly from an active IND enabling stage award or early phase clinical trial award. In those cases, a new CLIN2 application may be submitted to CIRM after the IND has been submitted to the FDA, even if the applicant is still waiting to hear from their clearance to proceed from the FDA. In that case, the applicant will have 30 days to submit proof to CIRM that the FDA has cleared the IND and associated protocol in order for the application to go to full review. As previously mentioned, the expected outcome of CLIN2 award is completion of the clinical trial and being well prepared to advance to the next stage if the clinical data are supportive. The award must be ready to start within 60 days of award approval, and the principal investigator and project manager must be able to commit an average of 15 or 30, or 50% effort, respectively, over the course of the award. And finally, the applicant must be able to provide evidence of their ability to co-fund the award at the required levels that I discussed on the previous slide. And again, please review our program announcement carefully for the details of those co-funding requirements, and reach out for a consultation if you have questions about that. Next slide, please. Okay, and as Rosa reviewed for you, we are implementing preferences for our programs going forward, and this slide lists preferences for the programs that the CLIN2 program will fund. And these preferences were established to help address the CLIN2 goal of advancing clinical candidates that address barriers to access and affordability, as well as to align with the priorities that were specified in the California propositions 71 and 14 that created CIRM. And now these preferences may be taken into consideration at 2 stages of the application life cycle. First would be during a pre-review qualification step to prioritize which applications go to full review. And then later, these preferences may be considered by the application review subcommittee of CIRM's governing board when making funding decisions. And my colleague, Dr. Lila Collins, will provide more details about the pre-review qualification process later in this webinar. So the preferences shown on this slide are also described in the PA and are in place for the fiscal year 25-26. Please note that the preferences, I think as Rosa referenced, will be revisited on an annual basis and may be revised in future years to account for the evolving scientific landscape as well as the composition of the CIRM portfolio. Next slide, please. There is a little delay. And still not seeing it. Is anyone else seeing it? I was going to discuss the required activities. There they are for the CLIN2 award. So this is a high-level overview of some of the required activities of CLIN2 applicants, which include all the clinical operations activities needed to complete the trial on time, outreach, enrollment, and retention activities to achieve trial enrollment demographics that reflect the target patient population, treatment of patients, of course, with the therapeutic candidate or a control, and also the follow-up visits per the clinical protocol, sharing of non-clinical and clinical data per the CIRM data sharing requirements, which will be addressed later in the webinar, and also activities that are associated with access and affordability planning for the therapeutic candidate in the proposed indication. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, so please do reference the program announcement for further details. Next slide, please. Okay, that one showed up faster. Okay, so this slide highlights some of the other activities that are allowed under the CLIN2 program, including natural history studies that might be needed for baseline or control data for the interventional trial, lead-in studies in normal healthy volunteers for the interventional trial, studies to develop biomarkers, understand mechanisms of action, and develop a potency assay, and manufacturing activities to supply the current clinical trial. We also, under some circumstances, would allow manufacturing for the next phase trial. If this activity would be expected to occur late in the award period and would only proceed with permission conditioned on first an interim evaluation by CIRM and independent experts of the clinical trial data, as well as the ability of the applicant to provide 50% co-funding for this activity if it is already an award that is subject to co-funding. Next slide, please. And finally, I'd just like to conclude with a list of the high-level out-of-scope activities for the CLIN2 program, which include any costs that are incurred on or before the date of ICOC approval, any discovery or translational research, any activities that are already budgeted or paid for under a prior, existing, or future CIRM award, or the costs of activities performed by a separate out-of-state organization that retains intellectual property or independent publication rights in any intellectual property arising out of the CIRM-funded project. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, so please do reference the PA and the CIRM Grants Administration policy for further details. And I'd now like to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Dr. Joe Gold.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, as Rosa had mentioned previously, access to and affordability of our therapies are extremely important to CIRM and to California in general. And in order to achieve our goal of generating these accessible and affordable therapies, we need each project to incorporate access and affordability activities that are appropriate for their stage of development. And in order to help with this, we provide a resource document, the Access and Affordability Planning Requirements, and there's a link to this on the CLIN2 homepage. This reference lists these activities, describes how they might be achieved, and lay out which are prerequisites at the time of submission versus those that will be milestones to achieve during the course of the project. Again, we don't expect a phase 1 trial to have all these activities accomplished by the end of the award. The activities we require at each stage are delineated in the reference document. Next slide, please. Now, the scientific review is performed by outside experts in the grants working group. The criteria they look at are as follows. The value proposition. Will this really improve the outcomes and address unmet needs for the patients? The rationale. How strong is the scientific rationale and the evidence, and how is the approach justified? The project plan and design. How carefully has the whole project been planned? The project team and resources. Is this the right team with the right resources for the project? And last but not least, the population impact. Will this project achieve trial participation that is representative of the affected population? And I'd like to pass this on now to Dr. Janie Byram to talk about the data sharing requirements.
Thank you. So CIRM has a data sharing requirement, and this means that if awarded, you will agree to work with CIRM to develop a data sharing and management plan. And by the end of the award, you will deposit applicable data into an appropriate data repository. So briefly, there are 3 elements of a DSMP. There's a metadata catalog, which details the metadata associated with your experiments, a data use limitations institutional certification, which details any restrictions on sharing data generated from biospecimens, and a questionnaire on anticipated data sharing activities. So the DSMP is intended to guide the management of your metadata throughout the award, such that when it's time to deposit data in a repository, you're organized, prepared, and not surprised by the effort required. CIRM also requires that clinical trial results will be submitted to clinicaltrials.gov, and the deadline for this is 12 months from the primary completion date of the trial. So you can find more information about data sharing in the PA, and you can also find this info by going to the URL that's at the top of this slide. It's findable by going to CIRM's website, selecting for researchers, and then information for applicants. And next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lila Collins, who will be sharing the application process.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'll give a little overview of the application and review process. And can I have the next slide, please? I'd like to start with where you can always find the most recent version of the PA, and that's right here on the CLIN2 landing page. So you can just hit learn more here, and it'll lead you to the PA. And also, if you'll see here towards the middle, this is the place to go to find when the next deadline is for application. And you can expect those approximately every 3 months, and the exact dates will be posted right here. Next slide, please. So we thought it might be helpful to see an overview of the full application process from submission to the funding decision. So once you hit submit, your application is considered to be under review. And from this point forward, if you have questions about the process, please contact us on the review team rather than your programmatic science officer, and we're happy to help you. The scientific review of applications is conducted by our grants working group, or I might call it the GWG. However, should we have a cycle when the number of applications exceeds the group's capacity to provide a quality review, we have the qualification process that is triggered to reach a reviewable number of proposals. And this process assigns points to each of the objective PA preferences Dr. Kadike reviewed, and we'll come up with a final score for each application. And we will use that to rank them to get to that reviewable number, which we anticipate to be approximately 7. So the top scoring applications within the grants working group's capacity then proceed to review. In the event of multi-way ties, we do have a process to break ties. That's a second step in qualification that we call subjective qualification. And this is conducted by our grants working group using a subset of the review criteria that Dr. Gold presented. So that's qualification. So the next step, and even if we don't require a qualification, one of the first things that we do approximately a month after the application deadline is ensure that all applications that are going to proceed are eligible for the PA. So we complete this process, and I will give you a little bit of an overview of some of the things that we look at in the following slides. And I should note that there is some overlap should we need qualification. There's some concurrent eligibility and qualification work ongoing, but we do complete the eligibility by day 30. Next, the cohort of applications would proceed to peer review, where they receive a funding recommendation. And that recommendation is taken to our governing board, the Independent Citizens Oversight Committee, who make the ultimate funding decision. And those two events happen approximately at day 90, the review, and 2 months after that, the ICOC makes their final funding decision. And of course, we'll inform you at key points along the process as to the status of your application. For example, after peer review, we'll share the review summary and the funding recommendation with you. And of course, after the board meeting, you'll hear from our talented grants management team, and then you'll meet your fantastic programmatic science officer. Next slide, please. So starting your application, hop on over to our grants portal here. And when you log in, you'll see the open programs that you can browse by clicking on open programs. And then just please select CLIN2 and start a CLIN2 application. Next slide, please. Here are some of the key application components where you'll spend the bulk of your time and effort preparing to submit. The online application has several critical pieces. It's important to establish the eligibility of the project, the proposed therapeutic, key team members, and also this is where you'll develop your budget. Please take an early look at the application to familiarize yourself with all the components required in both the online application and the upload section. And there are a number of required application uploads. This list is not exhaustive, but it does show some of the key uploads that you'll want to work on. Before I dive into these, I should mention, not shown here, but particularly important for biologics and small molecule therapies, is the eligibility upload. So please complete this eligibility data upload in consultation with the programmatic science officer to ensure that your therapeutic is eligible per the CLIN PA before completing other parts of the application. We really want to be sure that you have a regenerative medicine therapeutic that's eligible per our definitions before you take the time to complete a full application. So the key uploads here where you'll want to invest plenty of time are the scientific proposal document. You must use the latest version, so please always go to the grants portal and start a new application to ensure you have the right version. The regulatory correspondence, this is important for peer review, and of course the access and affordability upload that Dr. Gold just described. When the application is complete and all required uploads are present, only then will the submit button appear. And here I'd like to note that the submission is a 2-step process. in which first you, the principal investigator, and then your authorized organizational official, or AOO, hit submit. And so I'd just like to mention briefly, if you're a new applicant institution, you can save yourself a bit of stress by contacting our fantastic grants management team, who can help you set up your AOO in our application portal before the application deadline to avoid last minute surprise and getting stuck submitting. Next slide, please. So this slide highlights some of the key eligibility components we require and review. First, of course, regarding this FDA clearance to conduct the trial, we want you to have a safe to proceed protocol and some confirmation that your IND is active. As Lisa mentioned, if you are an applicant progressing from, say, a CLIN1 award or eventually a PDEV award, you may submit the application if you have submitted your IND without having the IND active yet. But again, you will be triggered to submit that confirmation 30 days after you hit submit, and we will confirm it at that time. So we also will confirm that all the key people that are required for the PA are on the team. The PI, of course, the project manager, and the data project manager. I should mention the data project manager is a key role that must be filled. However, it doesn't have to be a unique individual. This role can be fulfilled by another key person on your team. Again, we require one site in California. And of course, if you're an out-of-state applicant, the more California sites you have, then we can fund for the cost of those patients that are treated in the state. We also require you to conduct some certifications, and we will, for some of these certifications, go back and look for confirmation. For example, we will ask for documentation of co-funding, and we will, of course, ask to see the regulatory correspondence to confirm that the applicant is the IND holder, and again, the IND is active at that 30-day checkpoint that I mentioned earlier. And the next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Just a couple of reminders on this slide again, that we require 15% effort from the principal investigator towards the award. And again, you must have an AOO in our system to complete our two-step submission process. So please remember to get that set up to make submission day a lot nicer for you. And with that, I will pass it to my wonderful colleague, Alexandra Caraballo.
Thank you, Dr. Collins. And we are in the home stretch here. I will be covering the activities-based budget. The purpose of the activities-based budget, or ABB, is to provide a breakdown of the proposed budget at the activity level and to allow for evaluation. It works in tandem with the budget justification section of the application to help clarify the cost composition of activities and the funds calculator section for the calculation of overhead. The ABB automatically calculates the CIRM allowable costs and the applicant co-funding. So that's both the required share of allowable costs and any unallowable costs. The ABB requires the applicant to enter in their cash needs over project quarters in the quarterly budget allocation section. This informs how CIRM sets disbursements if the award is approved. The ABB allows the applicant to bucket costs into 3 broad categories and then smaller categories that CIRM provides called primary activities. The total cost of each primary activity is then made up of 1 or more secondary activities that the applicant enters free-form, along with a time frame and a sub-cost associated with each. The ABB is designed to set the maximum amount that CIRM will fund based on the applicant type and other eligibility selections made in the application. When an applicant selects a non-California organization applicant type, the ABB carries additional features to calculate the CIRM total funds requested amount, a breakout of primary activities that are conducted wholly in California, and then calculate the required co-funding. Next slide, please. CIRM will require co-funding at the levels specified in the PA based on total allowable project costs. Total allowable project costs includes direct, facilities, and indirect costs. Non-California applicant co-funding includes the required co-funding on total allowable project costs and the unallowable non-California cost portion. As mentioned earlier, the ABB and funds calculator will automatically calculate required co-funding based on the applicant type and other eligibility selections made in the application. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kyrie to hear more on contacts and deadlines. Kyrie?
Thank you, Alex. Just as a reminder, everyone, submissions for your applications are going to be due June 30th at 2 p.m. Pacific time. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to one of our various inboxes that you can see here for programmatic questions. Please reach out to clinical@cirm.ca.gov. If you have questions regarding the review process, please reach out to review@cirm.ca.gov. And if you have any budget or grants administration related questions, reach out to grantsmanagement@cirm.ca.gov. As a reminder, you can visit our website at cirm.ca.gov/CLIN2 to find any reference documents and this webinar and the subsequent post-webinar FAQ will be posted here within 1 to 2 weeks of today. And I also want to note, we have seen a few hands being raised. We would again ask you to submit any questions that you have to the Q&A box, and then we will get back to you in the subsequent FAQ. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Joe Gold to go over the information for resources for applicants.
Thank you, Kyrie. I'd like to point out to you some resources that may be of use to you as you plan your proposals. Now, the use is not mandatory, but we think they have a lot to offer. And these include the Alpha Clinic Network, the CIRM Manufacturing Network, and the Patient Support Plan. Next slide, please. The Alpha Clinics are a network of 9 California medical centers with high levels of expertise in delivering cell and gene therapies, and not coincidentally, they're the same centers with the capacity to perform GMP productions of these novel therapies. One of their mandates is to extend the reach of these therapies to historically underserved communities. Next slide, please. We've also assembled a manufacturing network of top-tier academic GMP facilities, and they are highly experienced in the production of complex cell and gene therapies. Next, please. And finally, the Patient Support Program is designed to provide a variety of support to California patients in CIRM-funded trials to ease the burdens that can keep patients from enrolling in trials or receiving the actual treatment. So again, it is not mandatory for you to use these resources, but we think it's really worth your time to check them out. Okay, back to you, Kyrie.
Thank you, Joe. And with that, we are concluding the presentation portion of the webinar, and we will move forward to the Q&A section. As a reminder, we are only going to cover questions which were previously submitted to us. And I will go ahead and take the first one, which is being, can I schedule a meeting with CIRM personnel before submitting my application? The answer to that is yes. Each applicant will have the opportunity to request an in-depth consultation via our CLIN2 consultation intake form, which will be provided after this. After this form is submitted, CIRM will follow up with a direct written response where appropriate, or will provide an opportunity to schedule a consultation with an available science officer. With that, we will move forward to the finance and grants management related questions, which will be answered by my colleague, Alex. First, which will be, do vendor contracts need to be signed and executed prior to submission of the grant application?
Vendor contracts do not need to be executed before submitting the application unless enrolling for an active trial. You would upload quotes for all vendor costs for which you're asking CIRM funding for, whether signed or not. And if a quote is not available, detail the basis of your funding estimate and the budget justification.
Thank you. The next question we have for you is, for the budget, can we use estimates for CRO services if we don't have firm figures yet?
For an applicant submitting during enrollment for an active trial, again, that's the key distinction here, a signed and active CRO or any other critical contracts must be in place at the time of application.
Thank you. Can you explain how co-funding works for for-profit companies, and should the total budget be 30% higher than what is requested?
For all co-funding requirements, please visit our CLIN2 webpage and see the link to our allowable costs and co-funding FAQs.
Is the application open to non-California based nonprofits?
Yes, a non-California nonprofit applicant subject to co-funding requirements must co-fund allowable project costs as well as the unallowable non-California cost portion of the project. The unallowable non-California cost portion includes 5 components. 1, costs incurred before ICOC approval. 2, funding over the CIRM cap. 3, the per subject share of the cost of clinical and non-clinical research activities that are not directly attributable to the treatment of California subjects in the proposed trial, whether conducted inside or outside of California. 4, manufacturing conducted outside of California. And 5, costs of activities performed by an out-of-state organization that retains IP or publication rights in any intellectual property coming out of the CIRM-funded project.
Thank you. Next question is, are California subsidiaries of non-California organizations eligible?
Yes, a California domiciled, wholly owned subsidiary of a non-California organization can qualify as a California organization if it meets the requirements of a California organization with respect to employment and payroll, management of award activities, and intellectual property rights as set forth in the PA and the CIRM Common Requirements and Definitions document.
Okay, next question is, how are milestones that are completed between submission and approval treated?
So project activities in the application can only be incurred on or after the date of ICOC approval. Operational milestones are a feature of the notice of award and are subject to negotiation after ICOC approval based on CIRM's sole discretion. For the contracting period between ICOC approval and the award start date, an awardee may incur costs against the award at its own risk to cover necessary and allowable costs. Please reference page 31, section C on pre-award costs in the grant administration policy for more information.
Thank you so much, Alex. And the last one for you is there a loan agreement template available to review the terms?
No, there is no agreement. Upon payment of the conversion, the revenue sharing burden falls away. All other terms of the notice of award still apply.
Great. And with that, we'll move next to you, Dr. Gold. Are access and affordability activities required to be completed prior to the start of the grant or during the course of the award?
Well, as we talked about earlier, the required A&A activities depend on the stage of the program, and some activities are required to be completed at the time of the submission, while others should be accomplished during the course of the award. And please see the link to access and affordability planning requirements on the CLIN2 Awards webpage.
Great. Next for you is, are protein-based therapeutics an accepted modality?
The answer to that is only if the mode of action is on a stem cell or if a stem cell is required for its production. Now, if you have doubts about the eligibility of your proposal, please schedule a consultation with the CDEV team by emailing clinical@cirm.ca.gov.
in funding considerations?
Oh, I'd say industry partnerships are highly encouraged, particularly when it comes to satisfying co-funding requirements.
And last for you is, can you explain more about royalties?
Me, probably not. So please see the link to our commercialization rights primer on the CLIN2 webpage.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Collins, these next are for you. What should I do if I encounter an issue while filling out the application?
Hey, you can please contact your friends at the CIRM review team, and we're happy to help you out. We're at review@cirm.ca.gov.
Great. How many applications will be reviewed?
We anticipate reviewing approximately 7 applications per cycle.
What type of clinical trials will be funded, and at what stage should the proposal be submitted? After IND clearing?
So we can fund all phases of clinical trials, from first in human to phase 3 pivotal trials. Proposals should be submitted after the IND is active. However, as we mentioned before, if you are a progressing CIRM applicant that has a CLIN1 award, you may submit once you have filed the IND, and as long as the IND becomes active within 30 days and you provide that confirmation to us, we'll continue processing of the application.
Great. And last for you is, how exactly will the preference list be used, e.g. 1 point for each, and how many applications will be reviewed for each cycle?
So the PA preferences are used for the objective qualification process that I discussed earlier. And our rubric assigns a point for each criterion, with the exception of an extra point for pivotal trials, for which, those receive 2 points.
Sorry. Next are for you, Liz. What are the funding cycles for 2025, i.e. when are future dates that the CLIN2 grant will be accepting proposals?
Yeah, thanks, Kyrie. So the CLIN2 funding opportunity is offered 4 times per year, which corresponds to approximately quarterly. Please do consult the program landing page, which we will update when deadlines for future funding cycles are set. We also encourage you to sign up for email notifications from CIRM, and you will then receive emails when new program deadlines are established.
Great. And are the grant funds distributed evenly across all open submission periods, or will it depend on the number of proposals in the first round?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the CLIN2 program budget is approved on an annual basis, covering the 4 planned award cycles, as mentioned. And then to follow on to what Dr. Collins presented, we have a qualification process, which she has described here and which is also described in the PA, which will be implemented if we receive more applications than can be reviewed within a given cycle. So through those mechanisms, we do aim to distribute the budget across cycles to cover the fiscal year. But please do keep in mind that the application review subcommittee of CIRM's board is responsible for final funding decisions.
Great, thank you so much. The next few questions are going to be for you, Paul. First is, what is the award amount if we have a phase 1/2 trial?
Okay, so the information like this can be found in the program announcement, but the key point here is whether the trial is a first in human or not. And assuming that the trial is first in human, the maximum award amount is 8 million in the case of a for-profit and 12 million for a not-for-profit.
Great. The next question is, does CIRM CLIN2 support a healthy volunteer phase 1A if coupled with a phase 1B in target patient population?
So the short answer to this is yes, we will support that. But as hinted at in the question, only in conjunction with an interventional trial in the target patient population.
Great. Are there any specific disease foci prioritized for this call?
No, applications addressing any disease area are welcome and will be eligible for consideration.
And the last one for you is, what are the accessibility and affordability requirements for a phase 1B?
So it's essentially this comes back to the first in human question that we touched on just a moment ago. If the phase 1B is not a first in human, it will be treated as a phase 2.
Great. And to wrap it up, we have a couple of questions for you, Sohel. The first one is, are there limitations for CIRM to participate in and fund phase 3 clinical trials, which are already approved by the FDA and initiated?
Yeah, thank you, Kari. The CIRM can fund phase 3 clinical trial, including those which is already initiated.
And then the last question is, will CIRM provide funding for BLA enabling studies, including manufacturing cost for PPQ activities?
Yes, so CIRM can fund BLA enabling studies as part of a phase 3 or a pivotal clinical trial.
Thank you. And with that, we conclude the Q&A portion of the webinar. As a reminder, all of the questions that have been entered into the Q&A chat will be compiled, and we will release a follow-up FAQ, which will address all of your questions. In addition, we will have written answers for all of the questions which we recently ran through. And with that, we will conclude our webinar, and thank you so much for all of our panelists for your hard work in helping us get this webinar done. And yes, if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to reach out to us at clinical@cirm.ca.gov. Again, this will be provided to you later, and we will get back to you as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.